Hi and good afternoon. It's time to get started. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Laura Zervos, and I'm a registered dietitian and licensed nutritionist. And I have a private practice where I help those either manage their weight or manage chronic disease through lifestyle choices, mainly their nutrition. And I'm really excited to be here today. And today is a subject that we deal with perhaps with cancer therapies where you experience taste changes. And we want to overcome those because nutrition at that time is very important. So we don't want to develop aversions to our favorite foods, and we want to make sure that our nutrition isn't compromised because of these changes. There is one example that everybody could relate to if you have not had these treatments, and this isn't even close, but it's called dysgeusia. One example of that, and it's just that taste change when things are different. And if you could remember, brushing your teeth and then having orange juice, and it just doesn't taste right. That's one example. So imagine that on a whole nother level. Perhaps things even taste metallic. You cannot get these things out of your taste. And of course, taste is connected to our other senses and of course, memory, right? So we want to make sure that we have some strategies to cope with these taste changes that we could experience. One recommendation that we have is not eating 1 to 2 hours before chemotherapy and maybe 3 hours after therapy. And like I said, sometimes this is because the food that we're going to eat can taste very different. And if it's our favorite food, it could leave us not wanting to have it. And for those of us that have never had a treatment, if you ever had one of your favorite dishes and you ate it and you became ill and you were violently ill, sometimes you're like, I am never eating that food again. This is the same thing. So we don't want to create taste aversion. So we're going to do everything we can to minimize that. A few ways to do that would be to maintain good oral hygiene, maybe brushing your teeth before and after meals, keeping the mouth fresh, keeping it clean, trying to reduce the amount of bacteria, trying to reduce dental caries. So things that are high in simple carbohydrate or sugar, we want to reduce the intake or, brush immediately after there. So there's no material there to cause caries, especially overnight. That's when the activity could be the greatest. And then the other thing that you want to do, and that's what we're going to do today, we're going to prepare foods that look good, smell good, and they're colorful. So, do you ever hear that saying, you eat with your eyes first, right? So you certainly, that whole, the eating experience, it involves many of our senses. It involves smell, it involves taste, obviously, and it definitely involves sight. And there's other senses too that take place in our mouth, the texture, the mouthfeel, all of those go into that experience. So we want to make sure that what we present is delightful to the senses. So again, colorful meals, flavorful meals, and things that maybe can take that metallic taste away. Another strategy might be to eat smaller, more frequent meals. Use plastic utensils. Believe it or not, sometimes metal, even if you're not meat, beef is usually the food that's associated with causing that metallic taste or that can be associated with metallic taste, but also our silverware. If we're using just regular silverware or stainless, whatever it is like that, it could also add to that metallic taste. So you may want to try using plastic utensils, and that could reduce it. The other thing, since I was mentioning about red meat being one of the offenders or that people consider, that people relate that metallic taste to, you may want to try chicken and fish and seafood, peanut butter, beans, dairy, anything like that, other good sources of protein that won't give you those that taste, and it's a good substitute for red meat. If you do choose to have beef, and I am going to make one beef meal today, we're going to try seasoning it with some fruit juice or marinating, I should say. So try some juices, salad dressings, even some barbecue sauces are good ways to reduce that metallic taste. And I think that the thing is to overpower it with some of these fruit juices that are bursting with flavor. You want to use herbs and spices, sugar, lemon, anything like that too. All excellent substitutes for a lot of flavor, because we just don't want to add more salt, right? We want to add flavor. Salt is a flavor enhancer. Lemon can be a flavor enhancer, but what we're looking for are like fresh herbs and spices. So go ahead and experiment. And we're going to use a couple today. We're going to use cilantro. We're going to use some garlic, some fresh ginger. Those are the big things. But anyhow, and some other ingredients you'll see as we move along. The other thing too, sometimes hot foods, very hot foods, are associated with some taste aversions, and that could cause some issues. So maybe you don't, maybe you allow your food to cool a little bit. Once dinner's served, and your family's eating, maybe you wait 5 to 10 minutes till it just cools down to room temperature. Sometimes even chilled is good. Now remember, if it's something left over, you still have to heat it and get it out of that temperature danger zone to make sure. Sometimes we don't reheat our leftovers sufficiently enough. So you want to make sure you do heat it again and get it above 140 degrees in the center. And then again, let it cool down. So all important things. The other thing is you want to eliminate some bad odors. So we're going to make a fish dish today and a scallop dish today. And it's important to remember that you want to, maybe if somebody else is preparing those things, how they could make our home smell, and you could smell it even the next day sometimes if you don't have adequate ventilation. You could tell that maybe you cooked fish the night before. So those kind of things, you would want to make sure that maybe somebody else cooked them, maybe they cooked them prior to when you arrive, or they cooked them and then you have them the next day, just so there's not any odors. Make sure that there's proper ventilation, windows open if that's okay during that time, if you're at that time of year when you could do so. Also using a ventilation fan, anything like that, lighting a candle if that's something that's agreeable to you as well. The other thing that we could do also is, of course, and that's maintain hydration, and that's important all the time, but by increasing our fluid intakes, that may help combat it too. We want to keep, like I said, we don't want to get dry mouth. We don't want to have any issues there. And then, it may take some time to find some of these appealing foods. And you may want to, if you experience where you're consistently, no matter what you do, you're consistently having some difficulties, you're going to want to avoid your favorite food, because you don't want to develop an aversion to something that you really care for. So that's just one thing to think about. And one thing that you could, there are studies that have suggested that maybe some deficiencies in zinc, copper, nickel, niacin, and vitamin A can cause taste changes. So you may want to check with your physician first to make sure that a supplement is indicated for you. And remember, if you are, I'm sure your physician will keep in mind that we do not want to have more than 100% of the RDA for these these vitamins and minerals. Sorry, a little tongue twister there. So let's get started with today. Today I have my camera a little bit, tried to move it for you, because today we're going to spend all of our time at the stove. And let's get started. What I'm going to do first is I have all of our proteins. I have them chilled right now just for safety concerns. So let me get those. Excuse me for 1 minute, and we will be right back. So let me grab those. The first thing is going to be scallops, and then we have some shrimp, and we also have some sirloin. So we are going to try some alternates to red meat, but I do want to show you that you can still use red meat if that is your preferred source of protein, but we're just going to use some orange juice and some other spices just to see if we could get rid of any type of metallic taste that you may be experiencing. So let me just put all of my items where they need to belong, and we can get started. So the first thing that we're going to make today, excuse me, is our beef and orange stir fry. Sorry about that. I just had to move my tray over. But anyhow, our beef and orange stir fry. It's going to have, we're going to make it a little bit thick. We're going to use some cornstarch to thicken it up. We're going to use orange juice. We're going to use soy sauce, sesame oil, and some peppers and garlic. And then it's your choice whether you would like to serve it over quinoa or brown rice. All of those are excellent choices. Or you could just eat it alone. That's also good. Or even noodles. But rice and quinoa would certainly make a nice addition. So first thing we're going to do, in a small bowl, we're going to take our cornstarch, and let me see if I want you to see the stove, but I also want you to see what I'm doing here with some of this. So I'll try to adjust the camera down so you can see I have my small bowl here, and I'm going to combine the cornstarch. Let me get a little spoon. I'm going to combine the cornstarch and the water. And I'm going to do this first before I add our other ingredients, just so you always want to make sure that your cornstarch is dissolved. You get any lumps out of it. And then we're going to add our orange juice and soy sauce. Our sesame oil. And crushed red pepper. And then next, what we're going to do is we're going to come over here and we're just going to mix this together like this. And then we're going to start stir frying our beef. I'm going to adjust the camera so you could see this here. I have 3 different sizes, all the different things that we're making. First one is going to be right here. And we're going to first add our oil. And you just need 2 tablespoons of canola. And we're just going to get that heated. And the first thing that we're going to do is stir fry the beef. And what we've done is it's a sirloin. And sirloin is very lean. All the beef with, or any cut of meat with the word loin in it, is always going to be your leanest cuts. So this is very lean. And I have trimmed off any visible fat around the perimeter rather. And I have cut it very thin because we are cooking it quickly. It can tend to be tough. So what we did is we cut it across the grain, and we have very thin pieces. So they'll cook quickly and they will be tender. And you can see it's nice and defrosted, and that's how thin, probably 1/8 of an inch thick, and nice little strips. So we're going to heat our oil. Then we're going to add this. We're just going to stir fry it for a couple of minutes. See if it's ready. And I don't hear any sizzle yet, so we're just going to wait. You don't want to add your protein too early. You want to make sure that your oil's ready. And I did take this out of the refrigerator, like I said, for safety concerns. I just wanted to keep it cold until we were going to use it. But you could also try to take it out a little bit beforehand so it's not so shocking, and I'm sure that we're ready now. We do not want to cool down the skillet. So if and we're only using 1 pound of beef today. If we were using more than that, I would say let's do this in batches, because you are going to cool down that skillet, and it's just going to take a lot longer for things to get moving. And we want everybody to get equal attention here. So you could hear as I'm adding, not adding too much, so we still hear, you could still hear that sizzle of everything cooking. So let's get that going. And I'm just going to give it a stir. We're going to let this go for a few minutes. And other cuts of meat, I mean, you could try tenderloin with this. It's just a very expensive cut of meat. Again, a very lean cut of meat. Of course, it's going to be tender. If you're having any difficulty chewing, you may want to try something more tender. But if you're on a budget, or you're okay with the taste of sirloin, I think that's good. You could also use a round steak. You could also use a sirloin tip, the whole roast. You could cut that up in some slices, some thin slices. Anything like that would be fine. If like I said, if you have a problem with chewing, you may want to go with something like tenderloin that is a lot more tender. Most Americans prefer something tender over something flavorful. And some of the tougher cuts of meat are definitely more flavorful. So just something to keep in mind. But we have a lot of action going here. Just give it a couple of stirs. Now, if you have a wok, that's a great thing to do too. You know, if you want to do that, it's done there. And the beauty of the wok is, again, very little oil. We only used 1 to 2 tablespoons of oil today. But the wok definitely lets you use less oil and keep things moving. So it's very important that we keep things moving in here. And we'll just give it another stir. And I'll show you the other ingredients that we're using. We're going to, let's see, after this, we are going to remove the beef, and then we're going to add our vegetables, which today is green peppers. The recipe that I'm going to be putting on my website used sugar snap peas. So I had a very difficult time. You know, I want to use fresh for you and not frozen, but I had a very difficult time finding sugar snap peas. I don't know why. So I thought, let's use some green peppers instead. And I just picked these this morning, so nice and fresh. And what we're going to do is, like I said, we're going to remove the beef, and then we're going to stir fry our vegetables with a little bit of garlic and get that going. Add the beef back, and then we're going to add our spice blend. So let's just give it another little stir. And the recipe actually says to remove with a slotted spoon. That way we're left with all the juices in here. And I'm just going to turn down my heat and grab a slotted spoon, and we'll remove that and get that done. And again, just 3 to 4 minutes. And I still have my oil here. I still have the juice from the meat. Okay. And you know, when I cut the meat in half with the spoon, you could see that it's done inside. So that's good. Okay, so now we're going to take out the vegetables and the garlic. And we're going to stir fry those. And I have, I believe here, about 2 cloves of garlic. I'm gonna add a tiny bit more oil, just because I don't want it to catch. And I'm just going to give these a little stir. Let that spread out a little bit. We don't want our garlic to be bitter, so you want to cook it long enough so you don't have any bitterness. And then we will get ready and add the rest of our, we'll add the rest of our mixture here. So, and then what we'll do is, let's see, we're just gonna let that go. This one today, unfortunately, they all require, they're shorter meals and they all require a lot of attention. If you've tuned into any of the other classes, we're always jumping around. We'll start something, throw it in the oven, prep something. But today, everything doesn't take too much time. So that's nice. These are all pretty quick meals. It's the main part is doing the prep work. And if you do good prep work, then you could just breeze right through the meal. And that's a great way to conserve energy too when you're trying to cook. Sometimes we could become tired, or if you're going through treatments and that's a challenge for you, if you could get some of the prep together when you have your energy and break things apart in pieces and stages. And then when you go to cook it, it's not as exhausting. And I do that with many things myself. There's some recipes I have that are so intense that maybe one day I'll make the sauce, one day I'll make the filling, and then just put it all together like a little assembly line at the end. Many meals I do that with, just because sometimes I don't have that large chunk of time too. So if you break it apart and do some prep and some thinking ahead of time, you could save a lot of time and energy. So our peppers are doing really nice. Nicely, I could say. Garlic is beautiful. We are going to add our beef back into the skillet. You can hear all that sizzle action. Give you a show here. We've got the beef and the peppers. Just gonna stir it all together. Give everything a chance for those flavors to come together. And then we're going to add our marinade, and we're just going to bring this to a boil after we pour it on. Okay. And you may find that you need to add more liquid. Depends how accurate you were with measuring your water, your juice, and your cornstarch. It could get a little bit thick for you. You may need to add a little bit more water. You could definitely add a little bit more juice. Anything like that will be fine. And I did predict that mine is a little bit thick, but it might be nice to have it this thick. But I think that I'm going to add a tiny bit of water. Just a little bit. And again, that's personal preference, but I think it was a little thicker than it needed to be. And you could also use a low sodium beef broth to do that too for additional flavor. I wouldn't recommend a full sodium beef broth, only because we've used soy sauce that's going to have plenty of salt already. You notice we didn't even add any additional salt. We're just relying on the soy sauce. So, oh, this looks really good. All right, let me take this up so you can see it. And it has come to a boil. So really, this has been about, let's say about 15 minutes it took us to do that. I think we stopped talking about methods to deal with taste changes. I think it took us maybe 10 minutes, so not too long with this. And again, like I said, you could put this over rice, quinoa, pasta, and just look at this, how nice. It makes a real nice hearty meal. Get that for you. So that's our first, and you can see the lovely green peppers. Again, you could use sugar snap peas. I could have used zucchini squash, anything like that, but these are going to be nice. They're tender crisp, so they'll have a lot of, and we could have cooked them longer too, but they're nice and al dente. They are late summer peppers, so their skin is just a little bit thinner, so it doesn't require too much cooking. But again, smells that it has that nice orange flavor that we were looking for. So hopefully something like that would help you with any taste concerns that you were having. So let's put that aside. And next we're going to work on our stir fry. And today we're going, this is one of my favorites. I make this quite frequently for my family. It is a garlic ginger shrimp stir fry. And it depends on your family and what your family likes. Maybe they don't like as much ginger, but you may need to play around with the recipe. This recipe actually calls for, let's see how much ginger, 1.5 tablespoons, which is a lot of ginger. So you may want to start out with, half of that, like 3/4 of a tablespoon, see how that goes, and then adjust upwards because you wouldn't want to be turned off. But anyhow, I think this level is satisfactory. I know in other recipes, I have cut it down slightly just to compensate for that because it can be overpowering, especially when it's fresh. Powdered, not as much, but fresh, definitely. So anyhow, I have a fresh ginger root and I did not save any. If you've ever seen a ginger root, it's in the grocery section, in the produce section rather, by garlic and shallots, and it looks like a root. It could be really misshapen or look like a little tree trunk, and you peel that outer, you peel the outer bark, so to speak, and then you're left with something like this. And then what I did is I just took a mini grater and grated it, and it's right here. Very strong, nice pungent flavor, and actually ginger could get very spicy. It could almost taste hot. So you want to be careful with how much you use. But anyhow, it adds a lot of flavor. So what we're going to do is we're going to add our shrimp to a bowl, and we're going to put some salt on it and let it sit for a little minute while we do some other things. So I have here today, there's 16, 20 shrimp, and we need about pound and a quarter. And 16-20 means that on average, you'll get 16 to 20 shrimp per pound. So as that number gets smaller, the shrimp get bigger, right? So if you have, there's a shrimp called U10, that means you would get 10 shrimp per pound. So that's going to be a bigger shrimp. And then there's very small ones. I think they're 3140 or 3640 rather. So just depending on what you're using it for. If you're using for shrimp cocktail, you might want a larger shrimp. If you're using it for stir fries, I think it's nice to have a smaller shrimp that everybody gets maybe a few more pieces. And they do really well. So again, if you're using them cold on a display with ice in like a shrimp cocktail fashion, you would want to have the larger ones. But stir fries, I think it's nice to have a little bit smaller. Fried shrimp somewhere in the middle of that. And it just depends what you like. And of course, you could always cut a larger shrimp into smaller pieces, but sometimes it's nice to have your whole shrimp. And another thing for shrimp too, like if you were going to grill it, you might want to leave the exoskeleton or the shell on and butterfly that so you have some, it gives it a little bit of structure while you're grilling it and it'll stay nice for you. And then you could serve it like that. And then your family or whoever you're serving it to, it's kind of easy to eat that way. So we're going to put our shrimp in a bowl and we're going to sprinkle it with a little bit of salt. I have a half teaspoon of salt here. And what this does is it gets a little bit of the moisture out and it also helps our shrimp to be a little bit crisper. So again, not a whole lot of shrimp, not a whole lot of salt, just enough to do that. So let me push this aside. Then we're going to do is we're going to take a bowl, and where did my bowl go? Right here, and we're going to combine a few things. So let me move this back a little so you can see me, and then I will adjust it as we begin to do our other cooking. So what we're going to do first is we're going to combine the oil, and we have our sesame oil here. And let's see, and we have our ginger. Like I said, 2 tablespoons of ginger. I'm going to add that. And we're going to add our garlic. Okay. So we have our oil, ginger, and garlic. And what we're going to do is we're going to put that in our skillet over here and start getting this going. So let me get our next skillet ready. Here, a little bit of oil. And again, we'll let that get going. And then we're going to cook these for just a few minutes. And then we're going to add our shrimp. And then we have some other things to add as well at the end there. So let's get started. I'll get another plate so we have something to put our food on. Right. So yeah, this is one of my favorite meals. And when we were talking earlier about having something that is colorful and delightful to the eyes, this fits the bill. So we have the oranges, we have red peppers. I'm going to put some scallions on top. So it is very attractive to the eye. So it would definitely, you know, start your salivating there and getting ready for your meal. So very nice. So let's start our oil, our ginger and garlic. I hear our oil. Okay. And we're just going to cook that for a little bit. We just want to brown that ginger and the garlic. So we're just going to give it a stir. We don't want to burn it, so we got to keep stirring. And I keep scraping the pan. I wish you could smell this. It smells great. I could smell the ginger. I could smell the garlic. 2 distinct flavors, 2 distinct smells. And together they're pretty wonderful. So just keep stirring it. Again, I'm not going to leave it unattended because I don't want it to get black and bitter very quickly. I don't want it to do that at all, but it can do that very quickly if you're not paying attention to it. Okay, so we'll just do that. And I'm going to take that off the heat. It's nice and toasty. Oh, it has a wonderful smell. It's very nice and toasty. I'm going to grab a paper towel. And if you've been with me on other classes, you know that we always pat, and this is it for everything. This is for chicken, beef, but especially fish, right? Because fish holds a lot of water. You always want to pat it dry and get all the liquid out first. Because if it doesn't, then you're steaming it. You could end up with a mushy fish. Nothing tastes worth. It'll never crisp up for you. If you're waiting for it to brown or crisp, it'll never do it if it's totally saturated with water. So it's very important to get that out. Otherwise, you're steaming, right? We're not grilling or broiling or anything. So, and that the salt really helped get a lot of that liquid out and draw it away from the shrimp. So just go like that, make sure I have it all. You see my paper towel soaking wet. So I'm going to grab another one. Okay, let's see. All right, so we have our shrimp and it's ready to go. I will put this back over here. And again, I'm going to just add this very slowly because I don't want to pull down my pan. And I have a little bit more liquid at the bottom that I'm going to get rid of here because I don't want to, like I said, steam it. And even the other thing it does is it dilutes our flavor. So we don't want to do that after we work so hard with all the different spices and everything. We don't want to have a bunch of water in here diluting the beautiful flavor that we have. And that's why too, when we were making the earlier recipe, yes, you can add water to something like what we were doing. I said you could also add beef broth. You're always, for more flavor, you definitely want to add the beef broth, right? But we already had pretty much of a concentrated flavor there, so you're certainly, you could add water. But think about it whenever you're using a recipe that calls for water. If you're making any type of meatballs or any type of filling like that, you'd want to try to maybe use some a good beef base or a good beef broth in place of that, just to add some extra flavor. Be careful because you can possibly also add salt, and you just want to make sure that you're not getting too much salt, or you adjust the extra salt that you're adding. And really, most of our salt comes from, the prepared foods. A lot less. Everybody sometimes thinks that it's the salt that we use from the salt shaker on the table. That actually accounts for a very small amount of our sodium intake. So just to keep that in mind, processed foods are what really increase the sodium level. And the recommendation for sodium is around 2,300 milligrams per day. And the American diet is probably somewhere in the range of 3,300 to 4,400 milligrams a day, and higher in some situations and some circumstances, depending what you're eating, what source you have. Where you're getting your food. Are you using food from a box? Are you eating food out? And I'm sure we've discussed earlier at some point that restaurants, and I'm not picking on fast food restaurants only, I'm picking on all restaurants. Most restaurants, even high-end restaurants, are going to be 30% higher in sodium, saturated fat, and calories. So we have to be very careful and mindful if we do have an issue with sodium, or if we are sodium sensitive. We want to make sure that we are preparing our foods and watching what, paying careful attention to what we're adding. So you may want to go with a reduced sodium broth, or today we use reduced sodium soy sauce, and it still adds plenty of sodium that you do not need to add extra. If you do need to add extra, you could always add it at the table. And like I said, that accounts for a small amount. And we're still stir frying. I'm just trying to get the shrimp till they're opaque. And that means that they're actually the white or they're pink totally through, that they're not fleshy at all. And that's with most fish. You're looking for that opaque color. So whenever you, like the flakier fishes like cod and flounder and sole and haddock, whenever you take a fork and you just give it a little nudge, it'll come apart real quickly and you can see that it's opaque in the center. Shrimp doesn't do that, right? We have to cut into it. It's a little bit tougher. So what you would do is just cut one with a fork and you can see, is it fleshy or is it opaque? So we're just gonna give this a little stir. And with even though I added them one at a time, and I'm trying to keep my heat as high as possible, it did cool down my skillet a little bit. So I'm just going to make sure that they're done, make sure that they get time on both sides. That's very important. That's why you want to make sure that your pan is conducive to the number of shrimp you have. And in mine is, we have, there's one layer of shrimp on here. You want to make sure that you just have a single layer, that everybody gets equal heat, and that way they'll be done at the same time. And that's important in everything that you're making, right? You want to make sure that whether you're doing a stir fry or you're putting things on a skewer for the grill, you want to make sure that your pieces are uniform. Or whether we're roasting vegetables in the oven, if we're roasting carrots or Brussels sprouts or potatoes, you want to make sure that most of your carrots are the same size, or most of your Brussels sprouts, if you have some big ones, maybe you have to cut them in half. Or potatoes, maybe you have to cut them in half so they're all uniform. That way they'll cook at the same time. You're not going to have some getting done earlier a lot sooner than others. And that's especially important when we were talking about maybe putting something on the grill that's on a skewer. All your meat should be the same size. All your vegetables should be close to the same size. That way you're not, one thing is not done and you're waiting on something else. So of course our shrimp, they came in one size. So our shrimp are the same size. But everything else that we have in this meal, the red peppers, the oranges, they're all around the same size. And that's important too, not only for cooking time, but for when you're eating it, and for, you know, how it is on, how it looks on your plate, how you eat it, how you're, you know, whenever you get a fork full of food, right? You wouldn't want something, you want everything to be pretty uniform in size. Just makes it easier. So we're just going to let this shrimp go for a little bit, and we are going to add our wine and our vinegar. And we'll give that a little stir. And we're going to cook this just a little bit until it's a little syrupy. Okay, let's see here. And we're also going to put in our peppers at this time. Excuse me. And that's going to get a little bit of syrupy, and then we're going to stir in our orange, just cook it for a little bit longer. The orange doesn't need too much time, and that should be it. Make sure we've used all of our ingredients here. And you can see a nice little syrup is starting to form. And we're just going to let this cook for a little bit more while our peppers are steaming and you know, our syrup is forming. Looks really nice. And again, this is something that's going to be nice and colorful and appetizing. That starts with the eye. So just, I'm going to leave that on high heat for a little bit while that syrup is forming. And then at the end, we will stir in our citrus. This is something also that could be served over some brown rice or some quinoa. And I think we've talked before about quinoa. Quinoa is an excellent source. It's an excellent source of fiber. And it's a nice addition. It also has a different texture, different mouthfeel than brown rice. Brown rice is also excellent. You could even put it over farro. You could probably put it over some type of noodle if you wanted. But I think rice and the quinoa are best, especially because it, excuse me, if you stir it all up, it gets coated in the rice and the quinoa, and it makes a nice little addition to it. So let's give it a check. It looks very nice. The peppers are really moving along. Our shrimp is cooked. And we've got all of the flavors. And it just needs to get a little bit more syrupy. And while that's cooking, we'll just talk about a few more things here. If you are experiencing some taste changes, some other things that you could do. You know, if your food is too salty, you could always add a little bit of lemon juice. If your food tastes too bitter, you could always add a little bit of sweetener. If your food tastes bland, again, that's where our herbs come in, and that's where some additional things come in. Marinating such a quick way to infuse flavor throughout the food. You want to always make sure that you are marinating in a glass bowl, not metal. We wouldn't have any type of reaction because marinades usually involve some type of oil, some type of acid, and your seasonings. Right? So once you have an acid in there, you wouldn't want to put it in a reactive pan, especially aluminum or any kind of metal pan. And you would not want to cover it in aluminum. If you had something, if you had something in a marinade that had some acid in it, which it usually does, lemon juice, vinegars, lime juice, anything like that. Tomatoes might have like some type of tomato juice in it. You'll see if you put foil on it, and if that food actually touches the top of the food that has acid on it, comes in contact with the foil, you'll see that there'll be like a hole eaten right through the foil, right? So not a bad thing for the foil, but if you look at the actual meat product or the protein or whatever you're marinating, you'll see that there's like little metallic, and that's really like the aluminum on there, right? You'll see those little spots on there, and they have to be removed. That's not for us to eat. So you're always safer covering with a lid that came with the bowl, like a plastic lid, or obviously some saran wrap or something like that. So let's look at this. This looks really nice. It's gonna look even better once we add our oranges. So let me just show you what it looks like. So far, we have this, and we're going to add our orange sections, and let me go stir those in. And oranges don't need, they don't need to cook necessarily, they just need to be brought to temperature. So they just need to be brought to temperature so they're not ice cold on the rest of your hot dish. So this has, this again, we use the orange juice, we used a little bit of rice vinegar, and we used a little bit of cooking sherry. Actually, I used regular sherry. You can use either, as long as you're using a good quality cooking or regular sherry, it'll be fine. That alcohol content does burn off, and you are left with the flavor. So that's another reason why we want to make sure that we reduce that and evaporate that alcohol off of there. So this looks beautiful. All right, so we're going to go ahead and plate this as well. Just look at this. That looks really nice and has a nice little syrup to it. Everything we use, and we have this, and then let me show you that. And we'll just top it with some scallions, and again, rice or quinoa. So we have a nice colorful meal. So this is the first one we used green peppers. This one we used red peppers and oranges. We have the green, shrimp is light colored. So you have a really nice colorful meal here. So that's another one of my favorites. I think you'll love this. Like I said, it goes great over brown rice. If you're not tolerating brown rice, you could always have white and or quinoa. All of that tastes really good on there. So let's move to our last item that we're having today, and that is citrus scallops. So today you'll notice so far that we've cooked with oranges. Let me turn off my gas here. We have cooked with oranges. So far, this last one, we're going to have oranges, but we're also going to have some limes. So we have a lot going on in this recipe. So a lot of levels, or a lot of layering, I should say, of flavors. So let me move my prep from the last item that we made from our shrimp and set that aside and get our skillet ready for the next item. Okay, so this is citrus scallops, and we're going to be using scallions. I have some chopped scallions, again, red pepper. I want to make it nice and colorful. Again, orange sections. The last one we used a cup of orange. This one we're using 2 cups. We also have cilantro, some crushed red pepper, and lime juice, some fresh squeezed lime juice, about 2 tablespoons, garlic and lime zest. And lime zest is that essence or that oil that we get from the rind of the lime or the lemon or the orange or whatever you're using. But zest could either be, there's a couple of ways you could do it. You could, where my lime is, I have a lime floating around here somewhere. You could take a zester, which has a couple of, it's a nice tool with a couple of holes in it, and you could actually peel parts of the rind or little thin ones, or you could take a nice little grater like I did the one I used for my ginger, the one I used for garlic sometimes, and get a little bit there. Or you could also do with the zester, pull back and you'll see the oil come right out of the rind and go right into your food, which is nice to use. But I have actually I've captured some on a plate, so we're going to use that. So let's get started. First, we're going to saute our pepper, onions, and garlic in the oil for 1 minute. So let me add the oil to our pan. Get this going. And remember, all of these recipes will be on the website. You'll get a link to those. And we did make some changes to the beef stir fry. We used peppers instead of snow peas. And you're welcome to use snow peas. Remember that the hierarchy of quality and freshness would always be fresh, then frozen, then canned. But certainly, you know, those you could still, there's still many nutrients to be had out of frozen and canned. And if that's what you have access to, that will be fine. You're still going to be, it's still a great source of fiber, phytonutrients, and other compounds that your body needs. So a great filler food, you know, vegetables typically have, you know, 25 calories per serving. You know, only 5 grams of carb, 1/3 the carbohydrate of fruits. So that makes them really the biggest bang for your buck when we're talking about the food group. So I love always incorporating the vegetables and try to make sure that I have at least 2 to 3 at lunch and dinner, even breakfast and snacks, to have at least 5 a day, at least 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. I would say, you know, and definitely high on the vegetable side. So let's get going here. We said we'll saute the pepper and the onions. And I've got some action going here. Onions and garlic. I'll just give this a couple turns. And we're just going to stir this for a minute. And we're going to add our scallops. And I used bay scallops today, and they are in pieces. They're a nice size. And I'm just going to, again, I have a little bit of liquid in here that I'm trying to get out, just because I do not want to increase my cooking time. I don't want a mushy product, and I want them full flavored, right? We don't want to steam them. We want to saute them. We want them nice and crispy. We don't want them mushy, and we want them full of flavor. So we have to get the liquid out, and I'm doing that now. Just use a couple of paper towels to get that off of there. And you know what I usually do, I had these sitting in a bowl. We could have had them in a colander, and this could have, you know, had less liquid in it. That's always an idea too. So let me just get that liquid off of there. Okay. We're going to add our scallops next. Okay. And our salt and pepper flakes. And it's just a small amount of salt. I think it's a 1/4 teaspoon, and some red pepper flakes. Throw that all in there. Sorry about that. And we'll just get this like served. So another really nice colorful meal. And gotta get that heat cooking up again. Since they were out of the refrigerator, even though they have been out of the refrigerator for some time, it did cool down our pan a little bit. So we'll get that back up and hot, but they are cooking very nicely. Just throw that. One of my peppers escaped. So we're just gonna let that saute for about 4 minutes, cook for 4 minutes, and then we're gonna add our juice and the zest, and then we'll reduce our heat, and then we're going to add our orange sections and cilantro until our scallops are done, which they look like they'll be done very shortly. So just cook up that heat there, kick up the heat. And we were talking earlier about some other things that you could do if you were to combat some of the different types of taste changes. And we talked, the last thing that we talked about was marinating the meats. And if we have, like we said before, try other sources of protein: turkey, fish, chicken, eggs, peanut butter, all excellent sources of protein versus red meat. If you have a bad taste in your mouth that you cannot get rid of, you could always, in addition to brushing your teeth before and after your meals, you could try chewing gum or breath mints or anything like that that may help get rid of some type of metallic taste, or sometimes our taste is just off. And we have to do something to combat that. You could even, like I said before, drinking lots of fluids, keeping your mouth moist, not letting it dry out. Sometimes a dry mouth also will concentrate some bad flavors in there, and you could get a bad taste. If you have any type of sores or ulcers in your mouth, you want to avoid the acidic foods, things that are easy: applesauce, peanut butter, things that are very, popsicles even will work, Jello, anything like that, cottage cheese. Yogurt could bother it. Yogurt, that's one thing that might have cause a little further irritation. Sometimes dairy could cause a little irritation in there too. But anything that you could tolerate that that you've had success with in the past is good. And again, you might want to try like a milder toothpaste too. Some of the very stronger, like a baking soda toothpaste versus some of the ones that have the whiteners in them. They're a little bit harsher on our mouth. And if you already have a sensitive mouth, that can exacerbate those ulcers and make it worse and make it more difficult for you to get rid of those. So let's just see how our scallops are doing, and they're beautiful. Okay, so next we're going to add our little guy here. Still looks a little fleshy. These are the same with shrimp and with other fish. You want to cook it till they're not fleshy at all, until they're totally opaque. So there was a couple in there that just looked a little bit not ready, not to my liking. So we'll just let them go another minute, and we will add our citrus and our spices to it. Let's see what else we have. We have our shrimp. We added the lime, the vinegar, and we need to get our lime juice in there too. So let's add that. And then we'll add our cilantro. And I recommend cilantro. Sometimes people substitute parsley for cilantro, and some people even call cilantro the Mexican parsley, but it does not, regular parsley, curly or flat leaf parsley does not have that same bite that cilantro does that we come to expect with some of these. When you're expecting a certain flavor, cilantro is, if that's what the recipe calls for, you're going to want to use it. And likewise, if something's calling for parsley, I don't recommend substituting cilantro for it, because it's not going to give you the taste that you want. It's definitely going to, you'll notice that there's something off, and you're going to wonder. So I'm going to add my orange sections now. And this looks beautiful, so colorful. And again, scallops and shrimp are an excellent source of protein. Unfortunately, shrimp gets a bad rap because it does contain cholesterol. Sometimes people are afraid to have it. They're afraid it's going to raise their cholesterol. But shrimp is very low in saturated fat, and saturated fat is the bad guy, and that's the one that you want to avoid. Shrimp is an excellent source of protein, very low in saturated fat, and the cholesterol that has shouldn't really affect our cholesterol, or the cholesterol that we have in our body. And remember, some cholesterol is necessary, so we do need it. Our body does synthesize it, but still, it's okay to have some as well from a food source. Okay, let's see. So this looks very nice. Let me plate it, and we'll look at all 3 plates. I have a nice, pretty plate for this one too. And the oranges at the end gave it a real nice touch. And again, you could serve this over pasta, rice, quinoa, any type of grain that you want, or you could just have it with, something, maybe some type of starch on the side if you want to. But this is just so beautiful and so colorful. Good source of protein, high in phytonutrients. We didn't overcook our vegetables, so they are bursting. Let me line up all 3 of our dishes that we made today that you can see, and you can see how nice and colorful they are, and obviously nutritious, and most importantly, hopefully they will help to combat any taste changes that you're having, by using orange juice and using some citrus fruits and some other spices. Today we used cilantro. You could also use, and we also used ginger, we used garlic, we used the scallops. I mean, we could have used regular onions, but scallions we've used in both of these, and they impart a lot of flavor, and it makes it a little bit unique. So yeah, so 3 great dishes today. Let me turn off my skillet there. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate in reaching out to me. And if you need these recipes modified, certainly I'd be happy to do that for you. Again, we could have used shrimp for any of these. We could have used chicken for any of these. We could have used red meat for any of these. All 3 of these proteins could have been put in the other meals. We could have substituted sugar snap peas for that vegetable. Something else that's nice, we could have, if you don't have any issues with grapefruit, we could have used grapefruit in the scallop stir fry. That would have been very nice, give it a nice little kick. But all of them should be, try them and see what you think. I'd love to hear what your experience was with them, or if you're having any difficulty with taste changes, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to discuss that with you. Thanks so much and have a great day.